Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the Dead or Alive League update at the end of round 11 of play here. We're going to start with the Premier League, Division 3 also playing as well. But over in the Premier League, we're going to start Portugal and France. This one a 5-2 affair going to in favor of the Portuguese. They improved to 6-3. France dropped to 2-7 off the back of this. The story, it was all Portugal. France start with the opening win at 5-1, but the Portuguese dropped 2 rounds in the next 3 fights to jump out to the 3-1 lead. France would answer back with a sweep before Portugal defeats France 5-0, 5-1 in the final 2 games. That would give them the 5-2 win needed on the day. They would remain as the division leaders at the end of the day with that win. Staying in the Mediterranean division, over to Austria and Switzerland, the second fight. Austria's jumping out to a 5-3 win early off in the very contested first fight, but before sweeping Switzerland in the second 5-0. The Swiss would follow with a 7-round victory in Game 3 on the ends of the earth before Austria won Game 4 to go up 3-1, 5-2. Switzerland would actually tie the series off of Game 5 and Game 6 with a 5-0 and 5-2 win before Austria would shut the door 5-2 and 5-3. That pivotal game in Game 8, Rig beating Genfu there. And that was a very crucial matchup between the two. Genfu picked to try and counter Rig, but it was too strong. The Rig of Austria was too strong to really try and take away that fight and would close out the series for Austria 5-3. Looking at the Mediterranean division standings, Portugal remain at the top, 6 points, 6-3 plus 12 fight difference. The Austrians right behind them, just three points in the fight difference category off. Switzerland at 5-4, they're a game back. Spain had the bye, but now they're sitting 3 games back, or at least 2.5 games back at 3-5. The French are a game and a half out at 2-7. They are on the outside looking in currently after their defeat. Over to Norway and Finland in the European division. Norway taking this one 5-3. The Finns started the matchup with the 5-1 win on Lorelei Upper before losing a match on Lorelei Lower in Game 3. Norway also taking Game 2 and Game 4 surrounding that for the quick 3-1 lead. Finland would take the sweep to answer back 3-2 before the Norwegians pushed out their 4th game in 6 rounds at Game 6. Finland taking Game 7 5-1, but it was a crucial Game 8 that really turned the tide and helped the Norwegians close the door. Game 3 is going to be the game we highlight here. Helena beating Leon. Leon all over the shop on this one, couldn't get any combos going. And Helena using a lot of her special stances very effectively in this matchup to take the victory. 5-3 for the Norwegians. Remaining in the European division, it was Denmark versus Belgium. Belgium coming into the match at 7-1 as the league's second best team behind the United States, and they would continue their momentum. Denmark actually jumped out to a 2-0 lead here off of Game 1 and Game 2, but it was the Belgians that answered right back in Games 3 and Game 4. Denmark would take Game 5 to threaten to try and take this series away from Belgium. They played them very tough, but it was the Belgians' experience that came out at the end. 5-2 and 5-2 in Game 6 and Game 7 to give them the 4-3 lead before pivotal Game 8 between Alpha 152 and Phase 4. All fireworks in this matchup, but it was the Belgians that came out on top in 9 rounds and would close the series out 5-3. Looking at those division standings, Belgium are on 8 points at 8-1. Norway are 4 games back at 4-5. Finland 4-5 as well. The Netherlands had the bye there at 3-5, 4.5 games back, while the Danes are a half game out of the playoff spots now at 3-6. Over to the first of the 2 Pacific Division games for round 11. Hong Kong versus South Korea. And this was a tightly contested affair, but not in any of the games. All these games were pretty much blowouts. They traded sweeps back and forth for the opening 4 fights to go 2-2 before Hong Kong would win 5-1 on Game 5. South Korea answered back in Game 6 to win 5-2 before taking a sweep in Game 7 before Hong Kong as well answered with a sweep in Game 8 and a 6-round victory in Game 9. So no real close affairs for this one. It was all one-sided once you got into the fighting, but it would be Hong Kong who took the victory. They improved to 6-3 and remained the division leaders at the end of the day, but more on that in a moment. Over to the Atlantic Division, which was the next matchup, Ireland versus the United Kingdom. The UK came out looking to improve on their 2-6 record, especially given that Mexico were playing later in that later in the round. But it wasn't to be. It was all Ireland early, 5-0, 5-2, before the UK answered back in Game 3, 5-0. But that was all they would get. Ireland would drop just 2 rounds in the remaining 3 fights. They dropped just 9 rounds overall in the series across 6 fights. 5-1, 5-0, 5-1, and the Irish completely outclassing the British here today. They would go 5-4. The Irish, the United Kingdom would fall to 2-7 with a -11 fight difference. So certainly room to improve. The other Atlantic Division matchup, Canada versus Mexico. This one, all Canada. They had 2 close fights in Game 2 and Game 4, 5-3 each. Taking a look at one of those pivotal games in Game 4, it was Brad Wong who beat out Bayman in 8 rounds there, but Canada with a huge sweep. The Mexicans would drop to 1-8. Canada improves to 6-3. The Atlantic Division standings, it is 8-0 for the United States. They had to bye. They remain in first place by 2.5 games. Canada at 6-3 are in second. Ireland just a game back now at 5-4, and they have a 2.5 game, or beg your pardon, they have a 3-game gap between them and the United Kingdom in fourth. Mexico at 1-8 are in the relegation zone, but are only a game out of the playoffs as well, with the UK being at 2-7. The -26 fight difference for Mexico, though, you believe would have to keep them out of a playoff contention for at least a little while longer than just the 1 game behind that they are. And the final matchup in round 11 of the Premier League between Japan and Singapore. Singapore and Japan would trade sweeps early to level the series at 1-1 before Japan took 2 straight 5-1 victories in Game 3 and Game 4 to jump out to a 3-1 lead. Singapore would answer back with a 5-3 victory in Game 5, but a very tightly contested Game 6 going Japan's way would be enough to really help bring them the momentum they needed to close out Game 7. Taking a look at that Game 6, Akira was a good choice for Singapore, and they played him very well, but it was just too much for Hitami. Between the strikes and grapples, Japan really using the character effectively and to her maximum potential to help close out Game 6 and go up 4-2. They would eventually ride that momentum in Game 7 to close out the series at 5-2. Here's a look at that Pacific Division standings. Hong Kong is going to be at the top at 6-3, but just a game back are South Korea at 5-4. Australia had the bye at 5-3. They're a game and a half back from the. I'm sorry, beg your pardon. They are a half game back from Hong Kong. Japan at 4-5. They are on 4 points. They are 2 games into the playoffs over Singapore, who are at 2-7. Overall league standings, Mexico is in the relegation zone at 1-8. They're on the bottom. Singapore 19th. The lowest ranked playoff team in the United Kingdom is 18th at 2-7. France 2-7 at 17th. Denmark at 3-6 and 16th, before Spain and the Netherlands both at 3-5 occupy 14th and 15th respectively. Finland's in 13th, Japan 12th, Norway 11th, Switzerland 10th. The Irish are into the top 10 at 9th, South Korea down to 8th, Australia 7th, Austria 6th, Hong Kong the lowest ranked division leader in 5th at 6-3, Portugal just 1 fight in the fight difference category ahead of them in 4th at 6-3. The Canadians are wedged between the division leaders in 3rd at 6-3. Belgium are 2 games ahead of those Canadians at 8-1, just a half game behind the United States in first place at 8-0. Over to Division 3. We started Division 3 with a matchup between the Philippines and Chile. Chile, a 4-4 team with a +2 fight difference. Good enough for second in their division, though, looking to take one off the Philippines, but it was all the Philippines in this affair. Chile started out early with a sweep 5-0 before it was answered back 5-0 in Game 2, and another 5-0 victory for the Philippines in Game 3. The Philippines just dominating from there on out, 5-1, 5-2, 5-3 to close out the series, and a pivotal Game 6 there. Bass was expected to really be a good counter pick for Lei Fang, which the Philippines showed, but it wasn't to be. They didn't really know the character, and that kind of showed in that matchup, not able to take advantage of the power that Bass brings to the table, and it was Lei Fang that took the victory at the end, 5-1 overall for the Philippines. Over to the Western Division, Israel taking on South Africa. The Israelis at 2-6. They wanted to improve their record. South Africa at 5-3, trying to contest for the division leaders in Egypt, but it was all Israel, this affair. Two sweeps for the Israelis and the South Africans taking one in game 3 before Israel swept in game 4. And it was Israel taking a 5-2 win in game 5 before South Africa took game 3 5-3. That was a pivotal game, but Israel shut the door in game 7, it being able to reset 5-2 at the end of that one. And that was the series for Israel. 5-2 there. They improved to 3-6. The other Eastern Division game, Malaysia versus Vietnam. Malaysia starting with a 5-0 win, or Vietnam starting with a 5-0 win, and everyone thinking this is going to be business as usual, but Malaysia with a 5-1 and 5-0 wins took the 2-1 lead. That was before a very pivotal game for Malaysia, taking it in 9 rounds. Momiji just beating Zach, coming down to the absolute last moment there with a sliver of health, Malaysia taking the win. And that was enough to roll the momentum into a 5-1, 5-0 win in Game 5 and Game 6. That one just their second win on the season, but this is how they would leave the standings. In the Eastern Division, the Philippines are atop at 8-1. They are 4 games ahead of anybody else, 4 points ahead of anybody else. Peru at 4-4. They had to bye. They were going to sit in second place and feel comfortable with Chile losing at 4-5 and Vietnam losing, now sitting at 4-5. Malaysia 2 games out of the playoffs now at 2-7. Last game in Division 3, Egypt versus Poland. Egypt jumping out to a quick 3-0 victory lead with 5-1, 5-1, and 5-0 victories. Poland taking 2 back on 5-1 victories in Game 4 and Game 5, but Egypt would shut the door. Very pivotal Game 7 there as we look. Lei Fang beating La Mariposa 5-4 in what would secure the series for Egypt. Looking at the Western Division standings, Egypt would lead at 6-3, South Africa at 5-4. They're in second place. Sweden with the bye at 4-4. They're going to be in third. Poland at 4-5 and fourth, and the Israelis are now just a game back on those polls in fifth at 3-6. Overall league standings, it's still Malaysia on the bottom with the Israeli victory, but they have improved their record to 2-7. Israel at 3-6. They're on the outside looking in, still in ninth. Vietnam, the lowest ranked playoff team, in eighth at 4-5. Poland at 4-5 and seventh. Chile 4-5 and 6. Fifth is Peru at 4-4, who had the bye. Sweden also had the bye. They're in fourth at 4-4. South Africa at 5-4. They're in third. Egypt is in second place at 6-3, a game ahead of those South Africans. And the Philippines are 2 games up on the entire rest of the league at 8-1. So that is the end of the Dead or Alive League update for round 11, round 12. All 3 divisions, Premier League, Division 2, and Division 3 will be playing. We'll see you for another league update. And as always, we want to thank our patrons before our go. This video is always made possible by our patrons. Our $1 patron, Maruja Rosario, thank you very much for your support. And that is it. We'll see you for the round 12 update of the Dead or Alive Leagues next time. Take care.